Trudy Mason sitting in for Aaron. And at this time of year, I think ever since really COVID hit and we had that terrible heat wave in May, soon after the lockdowns were declared in long-term care homes, we've talked about the need to have air conditioning, more air conditioning for vulnerable seniors. So there have been a number of studies, including one that we're about to learn more about maybe other ways, other things that can help in certain situations. And joining us is Daniel Gagnon, a researcher at the ÉPIC Center of the Montreal Heart Institute and associate professor of kinesiology at the University de Montréal. Daniel Gagnon, thanks for joining us on CJD.
Hi, Trudy. Thanks for having me.
Tell us about this new study about the use of fans.
Yeah, so the point of the study was to look at relatively simple and low resource strategy compared to air conditioning that could maybe help protect us when it's hot outside. So what we did is we, across our site in Montreal, as well as with a colleague at the University of Sydney in Australia, we recruited 58 participants that had a mean age of 68 years. Half of them were living with heart disease and the other half without. And essentially what we did is we had them come into the lab, get them exposed to hot and humid heat or very hot and dry heat. And then we tested things like a fan, wetting the skin, and even combining both and just seeing, the main point was to see, does it reduce the physiological responses of the body during heat exposure?
What did you discover?
So the main findings are that when it was hot and humid, so in our case it was 38 degrees Celsius with 60% humidity, so it's pretty hot and humid, the fan was beneficial. So it reduced the amount of work that the heart does when it's hot. It also slightly reduced internal body temperature, and people felt better. They felt cooler. Now, it came at a small cost. When we use fans in those types of conditions, our body sweats a little bit more. So we do have to be mindful of that and drink a little bit more to make sure we don't become dehydrated. And in our case, it was roughly the equivalent of 1 cup of water per hour. And then when we did the same thing, but in the very hot and dry environment, so in our case, it was 45 degrees Celsius with 15% humidity, then the fan was actually very bad. It made everything worse. Temperature went up more. The work of the heart went up more. People were sweating more and they felt worse. But in those conditions, wetting the skin, and we used a spray bottle, it actually reduced the work of the heart. It reduced sweating, and people felt a little bit better. So that could be a good alternative for those types of environments.
We don't often get that kind of weather here in never say never, of course, these days, but that type of intense dry heat is not something we generally associate with a Montreal summer.
No, absolutely not. And I think the results that are most relevant to a Montreal summer are more the hot and humid. Even still, it was hotter and probably a little bit more humid than we do experience right now. But really, we were trying to test sort of the limits at which fans and skid wetting could be beneficial. And our motivation behind that is that when we started back in 2018, there were recommendations saying that we should actually avoid fans above 32 to 35 degrees Celsius, which are temperatures that get closer to what we experience in Montreal. And I think what our results show is it really challenges that recommendation and actually shows that they're probably going to be beneficial up until about 38 degrees Celsius with high humidity, which in Montreal is pretty much any heat extreme that we've experienced up until now and probably for the near future at least.
For take-homes, for the people who either live in apartments without air conditioning or homes without air conditioning, or maybe they have a loved one in a care home that may have some air conditioning, in the common room or the offices or something like that, but not in their bedrooms. Is it worthwhile to purchase a fan to at least have the fan blowing on them?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is that if we can have access to air conditioning when it's very hot and we are considered a person from a vulnerable group or we know of someone that's considered from a vulnerable group, for sure we have to try and either get air conditioning or get at least moments during the day in an air-conditioned space, like a common area. But if we don't have access to air conditioning, I think what the results show is that fans provide sort of a right here, right now type of solution to kind of relieve a little bit the stress that the body feels when it's hot from a physiological perspective. And even if we do have air conditioning, we could combine it with fan use. And what that does is by circulating the air around us, we can actually put our air conditioner a little bit hotter, a little bit higher, and we'll feel just as cool as if the air conditioning unit was set at a lower temperature without the air movement. So that could also help kind of save some costs on electricity use.
What distance are you recommending between the person and the fan? Does it have to be right in front of them? Can it be in the corner of the room?
The key is to feel the air, more air circulation. So we had it placed right in front of the participants from approximately a meter away. Now, as long as we could put it a bit further and maybe on a higher setting, as long as we feel air moving across our body, that's the key aspect.
And would this also be a recommendation for people who aren't senior citizens? Is this also, in your view, something that anybody could do if they're living in an apartment or a home that has no AC?
Absolutely. So in theory, the principles as to why fans work or not are applicable to everyone. Now, obviously, the results of this study were specific to the population we tested, but there has been similar studies done in younger adults, so within the 18 to 30-ish age range. So this could be potentially a solution that anybody could use to try and feel a little bit better when it's hot outside.
The rehydration that you're recommending even in the lower temperatures that we might see here in Montreal, if you've got a fan going, is it a good idea to take in a little extra water?
Absolutely, because what the fan does really, it really helps. If we're producing any sweat, it's going to help that sweat to evaporate, and that's really our body's main cooling mechanism. So as soon as we do that, we kind of help the sweat evaporate. The body's going to produce a little bit more. So I think it is wise to combine the fan use with, like I said earlier, the equivalent of roughly 1 cup of water per hour, just to make sure we remain hydrated.
Yeah, sometimes the people forget to hydrate. I know in seniors' residences, there's always a big push in the summer to have water right at hand, in one of those big glasses with the straw in, to make sure it's very easy to take in water, because people may forget, or they just don't think about it, or they may only drink it at mealtime and not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the easiest we can make it for people to adopt protective behaviors, the more likely it is that those people will adopt them. So anything that can facilitate drinking a little bit more water and making sure that people are staying hydrated should definitely be beneficial.
Very useful advice. Daniel Gagnon, thank you for sharing your research results with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for the interest.
Daniel Gagnon, researcher at the Montreal Heart Institute, associate professor of kinesiology at the Université de Montréal.